may be familiar with Tour de France, the largest bicycle race in the world. The presenter has been an amateur cyclist for the last 38 years, competing in numerous bicycle races and charity rides around the country, but never the Tour de France. Professional cyclists look at leadership differently in many ways. Caution, this session may challenge some of your existing thoughts on what it means to be a leader. It will include several practical lessons on leadership that you can use immediately. There's no theory here. Every lesson is shared from practical experience. Put your helmets on, mount your bikes, check over your shoulder for traffic, and explore Peloton Leadership with Toastmasters International Second Vice President, Distinguished Toastmaster, Matt Kinsey.
Thank you, Alicia and Travanti. Thank you for the opportunity. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet, I do have some experience in your neck of the woods. My great aunt and uncle grew up in Ravenna. I don't know if we have any Ravenna Toastmasters here in the audience, but they lived there and I went up to visit them many times. And I used to live in Southern Ohio. So I'm a Midwestern guy by heart. So I'm really pleased to be here this morning. As Alicia said, we're going to talk about leadership today. And my hope is to challenge some of your traditional thoughts, not necessarily to convince you that I'm right, but just to think about it a little differently. And if we do that, I think I'll accomplish what I want to today. What is leadership? I think if we're going to talk about leadership, we have to define it. And my first leadership lesson came very early in life. You know, how many athletes do we have here on the call today? Or used to be athletes? Or my favorite type of people, the wannabe athletes. I reflect with all of you. Like most kids growing up, I wanted to be good at sports. And I was terrible. Just horrible. Have you ever met anyone who was struck out playing t-ball? Well, you have now if you haven't before. And after one game, I came up to my dad and said, "Dad, that's it. I'm really frustrated. I want to run home. Can I run home?" My dad gave me this kind of weird look, but it was the 70s. We were about 3 miles from the baseball field to my house. We were on the edge of the country. And I guess he figured somebody would pick me up off the side of the road and bring me home if I passed out. So he decided to let me run home. And I got home and my dad looked at me and he looked at his watch. He looked at me and he looked at his watch. He's like, "Matt, who picked you up?" I said, "Nobody. I ran home." He goes, "Matt, I think we found your sport." So I got into running and I absolutely loved it. And I trained and I got ready for my first cross-country race. I got up on the line, the gun went off and I took off running. And you know, how many of you remember that television show back in the 1970s? The $6 Million Man, you know, no, 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 no. And that's when I realized that that's how fast I was actually running, because all of the boys were passing me, and then all of the girls. I was devastated, crushed, humiliated. And I went up to my dad. I said, "Dad, that's it. Sports is not for me. I quit." And my dad said the strangest thing. Now, you might think he would have said, you know, quitters never win and winners never quit or something like that. Until he goes, "Matt, you can't quit. Your team needs you." What? What are you talking about, Dad? What do you mean my team needs me? I couldn't even see the little girl who finished 172nd. No one cares that I was here today. Nobody will care if I'm there tomorrow. And he said, "Well, Matt, you're wrong." He says, "First of all, that little girl feels better today because at least she beat you." Thanks, Dad. But Matt, more importantly, when you go back tomorrow, and you will, no one else has an excuse to quit. Your team needs you. Now, I've thought about that a lot over the years since that incident. I think as we get older, we actually reflect on the things our parents told us and realize some of the wisdom that maybe we didn't see at first. And I realized that what he was telling me, it's the same thing John Maxwell says. Leadership is influence. It's the ability of one person to change the thoughts and behaviors of other people, regardless of title or position. Leadership is influence. In Toastmasters, we expect a little more from leadership. I know we have mostly club officers on the call today. And in Toastmasters, we tie that leadership, that influence, to our core values of integrity, respect, service, and excellence. We tie that to our club mission of providing a supportive and positive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. Are you a leader? Do your thoughts and actions as a leader in your club influence other people in a positive and supportive way to the achievement of the club mission and to the achievement of their personal goals? I don't know. You're the only one who can answer that. So today we're going to explore some other options of leadership. One of the most important things in leadership is focus, and it's perhaps more true today than it ever has been before. Early in my cycling career, I think I'd been racing for about 6 months or so, and I was coming up a line just very much like what you see on the screen, and I saw the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life to that date, and I looked over and, well, it looked pretty much like what you see on the screen today. Crash. I wiped out my chance to win. I wiped out my team's chance to win. And afterwards, my coach and team captain came up to me and goes, "Matt, was she worth it?" When you're traveling at 30 miles an hour on a bicycle with inches between you and the people around you, with 2 square inches of rubber on the ground, that's not the time to lose focus. And times of crisis are not times to lose focus. And let's face it, Toastmasters, like the world, is going through a crisis today caused by COVID-19. Our membership is down in many clubs. Many clubs that have always been distinguished are not having the members that they've had in the past to do that. We've had to change how we meet. And there are a lot of distractions out there. There are a lot of things that we can lose focus on. I wish I'd listened to my favorite philosopher, Winnie the Pooh. No, seriously, he's a great philosopher. If you read The 100-Acre Wood and really think about some of the things he said, and this is one of my favorites. He's sitting with Piglet and Christopher Robin, and all of a sudden Winnie says, "What day is it?" "Well, it's today," squeaked Piglet. "My favorite day," said Pooh. What if we led every day in Toastmasters as if it was our favorite day, and we focused on the good? We know we have challenges, and I'm not saying ignore the challenges. What I am saying is that as leaders, we can choose how we react to the circumstances that we have. It's not easy. We know that there is conflict in the world. We know that there are protests going around because of historical wrongs that have been done to people. We know that people are viewing those protests differently. We can choose how we react to that and find the good in each of those situations. Be present. This is one of the focuses of mindfulness, is being present, being focused in the moment. What can I do right now? What is the action that I can take today, not tomorrow, not 2 weeks from now, not a month from now? What can I do today to make the situation better for everyone involved? One of the other lessons that I learned, this was probably my first year racing. And I went up to my coach one day and I was like, "Coach, man, I'm really frustrated. It's this criterion race. You know, it's a lap race, and when I get lapped, I'm disqualified, and I'm just really frustrated because I can't stay up with everybody. I keep getting disqualified, and I don't know if I'm good enough to continue being on this team." And he looked at me and goes, well, Matt, that's just part of the process. We've all been through it. just hang in there. It's going to be okay. And I was like, okay. So I went off to the race and I was having a great day. I'm on the next to last lap. I turn the last corner, come down the stretch, and I'm looking, I'm like, all I got to do is get to that finish line and I'm going to finish this race. I may finish this race last, but I'm going to finish this race. And all of a sudden I hear a roar from the 50 or so people in the crowd. And I'm like, what's going on? I look over my shoulder and there's my team captain, my coach, barreling down on me as fast as he can go. And all I'm thinking is, I've got to get to that line in front of him. I've got to get to that line in front of him. And I reached down and somehow I was able to sprint and get across that line. And in fact, some people thought I'd won the race because they didn't realize I was a lap behind. And after the race, I was mad. I found my coach. I'm like, what are you doing to me? You know how important it was for me to finish that race. You had the race won. You didn't need to sprint. You didn't need to try to pass me. What the were you doing? And he looked at me in his normal, calm way, and he said, well, Matt, there's no gifts in cycling. Oh, and by the way, did you finish the race today? I was actually so mad at him, I had to think about it. And I went, well, yeah, I did. He just kind of shook his head and said, you're welcome. There's no gifts in cycling. There are no gifts in leadership either. Everything you do in leadership is earned. No one's going to give you anything, and don't expect that anyone's going to give you anything. They're not necessarily, even though we would love for them to give you respect, there's an aspect of respect that is earned. Even though you hope that they would give you attention, you have to be willing as a leader to command attention, to get out of your comfort zone. Even though you would hope that there are not going to be conflicts on your team and they would give you that gift, there are going to be conflicts and you cannot avoid them. You have to deal with them head on in a positive and supportive way, trying to come to a resolution with everyone involved. No one's going to give you anything in leadership. And if you think they are, my experience says you're mistaken. Another aspect of cycling that has a lot to do with leadership is the amount of work. I'm going to show you a couple of diagrams here to help you understand my point. So on this first diagram, you see two cyclists in line, and the colored lines are the wind hitting that cyclist as he bikes. And see what happens to the lines. They're all coming straight into the cyclist, but then look what happens. Many of the lines bend around the cyclist, go up and over the cyclist, hit him at an angle rather than head on to the second cyclist in line. And what the research says is that second cyclist, if he's positioned perfectly, can save up to a third of his work, using a third less energy to go just as fast. And just like in NASCAR, the more people you have in the line, the faster the group can go. And in fact, in a group of 9 or 10 people, the overall group can save on average 50% of their energy, which equates to about a 15 to 20% increase in their average speed. And when we do time trials where it's just you against the clock, the top cyclists in the world will average in excess of 30 miles an hour. A team time trial will average 34, 35 miles an hour at times. It's that significant. So what do cyclists do? Well, this is what we call the PACELINE. And what you see is the first cyclist bikes for a little bit, then eventually he pulls off to the side, drifts to the back, and gets right back in line, and then the process repeats. And doing this, that group can go 10% faster. This group of 4 people can go 10% faster than if they were on their own, or if they had one person up front the entire time. And you'll see this if you ever watched a bicycle race, especially the long distance ones, you'll see these pace lines come and go so that they spread out the workload. And what they're doing is they're saving everybody's energy for when the race really gets significant. So as leaders, we have to work together. So how does this work in Toastmasters? I want you to think about your 7 officer roles. So what is the job of the president? Well, the president needs to be the face of the club, set the direction for the club, and make sure that the other officers are doing their job. The VP of Education is working with each member to understand his or her goals, to understand what they're trying to accomplish, to put a good agenda together on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis, depending on how frequently you meet. And they need to do that job so that they understand members' goals and help them achieve them. The VP of Membership needs to make sure that everybody who walks through the door who's not a member understands what it takes to become a member and encourages them and invites them to do so. The VP of PR is bringing people through the door, making sure that people understand that your club is there and that you want visitors, and you want, whether it's in a corporate club or a community, that you want people to be there. The secretary makes sure that all the paperwork gets taken care of and that the member gets registered at Toastmasters International so that they can get on board. The the treasurer makes sure that all the money is taken care of and that everyone's paid their dues and all of the obligations of the club are taken care of. And the sergeant at arms makes sure that the room, whether it's a virtual room or a physical room, is prepared and ready to go. And if everybody does their job, it makes everybody else's job easier. But when people drop the ball and they're not held accountable for it, then the president works harder or the VPE works harder. The other part of this is to gather teams. Toastmasters never designed your role as an officer to be independent. Everybody except the president has a committee that should be working for them. Recruit 2 or 3 people from your club to help you with education, with public relations. Get somebody to do the website. Maybe not the VPPR doing the website, but somebody else doing the website. Work together and everybody will work less and you will produce more and go faster as an organization. Another aspect of this is seen in the tour. So the gentleman in yellow, the 5th person in line, is a gentleman named Chris Froome. He's won 4 Tour de France's. And there are only 3 people in history who have legitimately won 5 Tour de France's. Notice where he's at. He's leading from behind. And what is his team doing? Well, his team is doing 3 things. One thing they're doing is they're driving the pace so that the other teams can't attack and leave him behind. The second thing they're doing is they're keeping him at the front of the race to control it and to keep him out of crashes. Because most crashes in a bicycle race happen in the second portion of the pack, not in the front portion of the pack. And the third thing they're doing is they're allowing him to save as much energy. What you'll see is these 4 gentlemen will rotate and Chris will stay exactly where he is. So that when it comes down to that last portion of the race where Chris needs every ounce of energy he's got the reserves to do that. In other words, they're protecting their leader. So what does that look like in Toastmasters? My experience, and some of you may have experienced the same thing, one of our challenges in Toastmasters is that we are much better at evaluating speakers than we are at evaluating leaders. We just do a better job. I have personally been on the reception of some harsh criticism for things that I had done where I deserved to be corrected. But the tone of that criticism was so negative and so vehement and so full of vitriol that I couldn't hear the message. And in fact, if that person had provided an evaluation for a speaker like that, they probably would have been voted out of the club.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that we let things go. I'm not suggesting that I was in the right with what I did. What I am suggesting is that we need to evaluate our leaders in the same tone, in the same manner, in the same spirit that we evaluate our speakers. Let them know what they've done well. Let them know where they can improve and how their actions have landed on you, how they've impacted you in a positive and supportive way, with the intent to help and not tear down. This is one way we can protect our leaders. Another way to protect our leaders is to protect them from the nonsense. I can tell you, and Alicia, you're going to learn this year, and Sravanti can probably share this with you, and your past district directors like Vicky can share this with, and Deanna can share this with you as well. A major part of the job of district director is conflict management and conflict resolution. And I love idea conflict. I love when we're trying to solve a problem and different people have different ideas about how to solve it, and we have to struggle to gain acceptance of one idea that we're going to move forward with it. That's healthy conflict. But personality-based conflict, ego-based conflict destroys a team from within, and it has to be dealt with. So deal with this on your own. Don't drag the district director into it. Don't drag your club president into it unless it's absolutely necessary and you're unable to resolve it on your own. It's much better for you to deal with this because they have a job to do. They're trying to stay focused on the race. They're trying to stay focused on the club mission or the district mission. And they don't need the distractions. They don't need the energy drain that comes from doing that. I ask you this year, particularly this year, next year is going to be challenging. Our challenges are different this coming year than they were last year. I worked as a lifeguard one summer, and there were two important lessons from the lifeguard that I've learned that have stuck with me in my leadership. One is you have to rescue before you recover. So if you have an individual who is drowning in the water and having a heart attack, the heart attack has to wait until you get them out of the water because you cannot do CPR while you're in the water. It will drown both of you if you try. So the most important thing is to get them out of the water and then work on the heart attack situation or the bleeding or whatever else is going on. The most important thing is to get their head out of the water so they can breathe because you can only survive for a few minutes without breath. The second thing I learned is that you have to respond and not react. Now, reaction is important. If you're driving down the road and somebody that you're following too closely slams their brakes on, you've got to react quickly or you're going to rear end them. However, you also want to figure out what else is going on around. So even in that quick reaction, you have to respond. In sports, you have to react. You don't have time. When the guy hits the ball and you want to catch it, you've got to react quickly. You can't think about your process. But in leadership, there's a process we go through. The most dangerous thing you can do as a lifeguard is to get in the water to try to save somebody. They teach us do everything you can to stay out of the water because your chances of drowning go up 100% or more if you get in the water with them. And now you're going to have two dead bodies instead of one. So you want to take buoys, you want to take poles, you want to take a boat to rescue them rather than getting in the water yourself. So stay out of the water, focus on the recovery now. We're in recovery mode. We've rescued our clubs. We have to do things differently. We have to approach it differently. So one quick tip that I'll share with all of you, in a face-to-face meeting, it's very easy to see somebody headed towards the door at the end of the meeting and walk over and kind of intercept them so that you can find out what their thoughts were in the meeting, get them an application, invite them to come back. In a virtual meeting, they're gone. So one tip that you can start using tomorrow is to use your breakout rooms. Create a breakout room, invite your visitors to the breakout room with about 5 minutes left in your meeting along with the VP of membership, so the VP of membership can have that conversation with them about what it takes to become a member, the costs, the commitment, the expectations of your club, that they don't walk away. The second thing is to create an online guest book. Find somebody in your area, in your club that knows how to create a Google form for free. Create a Google form so people can go in and sign up so now you can follow them, and then follow up after the meeting with a letter. Make some videos of your members talking about their experience in Toastmasters. Send those visitors a link of your members talking about Toastmasters and what it's done for them. Send them a link with digital content from the Toastmasters website to help them understand the organization and to help sell the problem. It's a marketing issue because we don't have a physical packet we can give them anymore. But as you're doing that, you need to think about your traditions. and the things we've done. Tradition is very important. It is a part of the culture that binds us together. And when I was invited to join the racing team from my cycling group, it was a great big honor. The coach came up to me and says, Matt, we want to invite you to join the cycling racing team. And I was thrilled. I'd gotten to the point where I was good enough to become part of their racing team. He said, but there's just one problem. I said, well, what? He goes, your legs. I'm like, what do you mean my legs? My legs look awesome. I got calves to kill for. My thighs are wonderful. What do you mean my legs? He goes, well, you're embarrassing us because your legs are hairy. And I said, what? He goes, you got to shave your legs. So imagine I'm 15 years old and I go to my mother and I say, Mom, can you teach me how to shave my legs? Now, to my mother's credit, she did not overreact. I can only imagine what thoughts were in her head. But her only response was, why? I said, well, my coach, I just got invited to join the cycling team, and the coach said I got to shave my legs. And she goes, okay, why? If he asked you to jump off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? And so I went back to my coach, and I'm like, well, why? And he gave me some explanation about grease and hairs on the legs and massages. And when you crash, it's easier to clean up with. And I was like, okay, I get it. He goes, Matt, it's tradition. Cyclists have been shaving their legs for 100 years. If you want to be a part of the team, you got to shave your legs. So I went back to my mom and gave her that. And she said, okay, I'll show you how to shave your legs. And you get used to it after a while. It is important to honor tradition. It's incredibly important to honor tradition. But at the same time, you have to question those traditions. And we as an organization are questioning our traditions more than ever right now. And so what I would ask you to do is think about a framework that my wife came up with. She's a past district director for District 47. And she would tell the district what is required, what is optional, and what serves you well. She would ask those questions. So what is required of a Toastmasters club? Well, very simply, what's required is that you have a minimum of 8 paid members, 20 to start a new club, that you do speeches from the Toastmasters educational program, and that you do written and verbal evaluations. That is what is required. Everything else is optional, including table topics. Now, are table topics a good idea? Absolutely. I think it's the best part of the meeting. Maybe not the most meaningful, but it's the most fun part of the meeting. And it's probably the one that people take into their day-to-day life quicker than anything else, is getting involved with table topics. But look at your other traditions in your club and ask, are they required? Are they optional, and do they serve us well? So when my wife was district director, she went over to the Bahamas. The Bahamas is part of District 47. And one of the members came up to her and goes, yeah, we're having a problem recruiting people because they say Toastmasters is stush. Now, stush is a Bahamian term that basically means stuck up. They got their nose in the air. And she said, well, why do they say that? Well, a lot of the clubs in the Bahamas require professional dress. So for the men, they want you to be in a shirt, tie, and jacket. For the women, they want you to be in a professional dress, not business casual, not casual, but professional dress. And she had this conversation with them, and they relaxed their dress code. And within a few months, the people they were attracting were joining their club, and the club is very successful. That's a part of your culture as a club, and it's not easy to change, but it's worth examining. Now, we also have a tradition that is ending in 17 days, the traditional Toastmasters educational program. This competent communicator, advanced communicators, those programs are ending. And this is a question the board went through. How do we honor tradition? And there's a lot of the traditional elements of the CC in Pathways. but we needed to move forward because the answer for the competent communicator was, as an organization, it was not going to serve us into the 21st century and beyond. So we had to make the change. And yes, it's been rough. And yes, the change that just came out about 10 days ago in base camp is fantastic. And I wish it'd been there to begin with. But we're continuing to make progress on it. So if you have members who are reluctant to move into pathways, my encouragement to you is stop using the word pathways. This is our educational program. But understand that change can be one of the most difficult things that people go through. Change is hard. And it's easy for some of us. I love change. I'm an IT person. And if I couldn't deal with change, I couldn't be in my business. But for some people, change is very difficult. And we have to be empathetic to that. We have to honor their value. What some of the members are really telling you, it's not about the program, it's about them and their knowledge, because maybe they've been a member for 30 or 40 years, and now their knowledge, they feel like their value to the club is not as high. And you need to reassure them that their value is just as high, maybe higher, because they have that experience that no textbook can make up for. They've been evaluating people for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, and we value them. And we'll do whatever we need to help them to deal with the technology. Now, one thing this COVID-19 crisis has done is a number of people, a vast number of people, have gotten comfortable with technology very quickly because of their love for Toastmasters. And I think we're going to see the same thing with Pathways. Our values is another thing I want to talk about, the importance of our values. And I talked about them earlier. Toastmasters' core values are integrity, respect, service, and excellence. And I think we need to define those a little bit more. You know, a lot of people will tell you integrity is doing something in private when no one's watching, and that's what your integrity is, doing the right thing in private. And there's some truth to that, but to me, integrity starts within. It starts with you being true to yourself. And there are so many temptations to fall out of integrity on a daily basis. To not make that phone call you said you were going to make. To not deny yourself that donut you said you were going to deny yourself. To not follow up on the conversation. When I was visiting Japan for work, one of the members there in Japan wanted to thank me for the work I'd done while I was there, and he decided he wanted to take me to the let's just say the adult entertainment area in Japan. And I had to decline. I'm a happily married man. I've been married for 31 years now, and I really didn't have any desire to participate. But I also had to honor their tradition, because this at the time was a tradition for businessmen to honor other businessmen. And I had to make it okay with him. So I had to honor his tradition and maintain my integrity at the same time. And it was tricky. But sometimes for some people, values matter more than winning, which is what I hope is the case for you. But sometimes that's not the case. When I was a young cyclist, I watched in awe as Lance Armstrong apparently won his first Tour de France. His story was amazing. He had suffered from testicular cancer, almost died, come back from that, and was now going to be the second American man to win the Tour de France. It was an inspiration to all of us, especially in the cycling community. Millions of bicycles were sold because of Lance. And he began to raise millions of dollars for cancer research through his Livestrong Foundation. He was literally on top of the world as one of the most influential athletes and people in the world because of what he'd done on two wheels over a 3-week period in June and July in France. And it was all based on a lie. And not only did he lie about his accomplishments and deny the use of performance-enhancing drugs, he went out and he destroyed people who tried to call him out for the truth. I picked this particular picture because of the look in his eyes. This picture was taken during his interview with Oprah Winfrey. I do not see any remorse on his face. I do not see any regret. What I see is a man who is defiant that what he did was okay. And his actions since then have continued to demonstrate that he really doesn't think he did anything wrong. In Toastmasters, in particular, our values matter more than winning. June 30th, you need one more goal. And you know that Bob is scheduled to speak next week. So let's go ahead and give him the credit so that we can get distinguished. Please don't do that. We need a couple more members. So let me add my 18 and 19-year-old kids to the roster, and they're never going to join the club. They're never going to participate, but we need those 2 more members. Please don't do that. If you have to cheat to win, in my opinion, you really haven't won. You're just getting a trophy. Our values are incredibly important to us as an organization. Treat your members with excellence. Show them respect. Serve their needs. And maintain your integrity. And if you can do those things as a leader, I'll be very pleased, and I think others will be very pleased with you as well. I was at a convention, educational seminar in Scottsdale, Arizona, several years ago. And at lunch, the facilitator looked at us and says, "All right, everyone, I want you to go out on the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona. I want you to find a stranger, invite them to lunch. You have to get someone to go to lunch with you, and come back, and I'm going to ask a few of you to share your stories." So there I was, standing in front of a Starbucks in Scottsdale, Arizona. In fact, this exact Starbucks, I found the picture on the internet, trying to get a stranger to go to lunch with me. And I don't know if they thought I was trying to convert them, to ask them out on a date, or to get them to sell Amway, but it was not going well. I'd say, "Hey, I'd like to take you to lunch," and they're like, yeah, and they kind of walk away. And I was a little frustrated because I wanted to look good. I wanted to get this task done. I'm a person who likes to get things done, as some of you know about me. And so I was getting frustrated, and all of a sudden something my mom used to tell me popped into my mind. She said, "Matt, whatever you do, find the purpose within it." So I was like, well, what am I doing? I'm trying to accomplish a task. What if I decided to thank a veteran for his service? So I just pictured in my mind, what does a veteran look like to me? And I pictured an older man. I saw a cane, and I saw a ball cap. The word Arizona came across my mind, but I was in Arizona, and no big deal. I stood up and I walked around the corner. And Alicia, if it hadn't happened to me, I would find it hard to believe. But the exact man I had pictured was standing in front of me, an older man with a cane and a ball cap that said USS Arizona. And I walked to him and I said, "Sir, would you please do me the honor of going to lunch with me?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, why?" Well, that was a good start. He didn't walk away. And I said, "Well, I made a decision a few minutes ago. I wanted to take a veteran to lunch to thank him for his service. And I noticed your cap. Would you please do me the honor of having lunch with me?" And he looked at me and thought a moment. And he said, "Well, my mama told me never turn down a free lunch." So we went around the corner. You can't quite see the restaurant in this picture. Sat down for food. And I asked him, his name was Bill. I said, Bill, did you know someone on the Arizona? Know someone? Hell, boy, I was on the Arizona. I will never forget it. It was morning assembly. We were on deck for flags, and all of a sudden I heard the air raid sirens go off. I saw smoke. I heard zeros. I looked up. One of them passed so close to me, I swear I could have touched it. And then there was an explosion. And somehow I ended up in the water. I was sitting there trying to check on my buddies. Some of them were really struggling. Some of them were gone. Some of them came up and said, there's people's truck inside. So we dove down and we could hear people banging on the inside, wanting to get out and being trapped underneath. I started helping the crews get people into the boats. And with my last energy, I hauled myself up into a rescue boat and watched the Arizona sink to the bottom of Pearl Harbor. I will never forget that day. Wow. After a few minutes, we started talking again. Finally, the waiter came and he brought the check. He gave it to me. And Bill snatched it out of my hands. And I was like, Bill, I told you I wanted to take you lunch. He goes, yeah, I know what you said. So what? So I said the first thing that came to my mind. He said, well, my mama told me never turn down a free lunch. I almost missed a moment that will stay with me the rest of my life, to hear from a genuine hero from a dark day in American history. A man who put it all on the line and who is now buried with his friends at the USS Arizona Memorial in Hawaii. I almost missed that because I was focused on completing a task rather than being focused on connecting in a genuine way with another human being. How many other times have I done that? Dr. Smedley did not create Toastmasters to accomplish tasks. He created Toastmasters to change the trajectory of people's lives, to give them genuine self-confidence so that they could learn to speak and they could learn to present their ideas to other people and make their world, that local world, that regional world, that global world a little bit better. Now, am I suggesting tasks aren't important? No, tasks are incredibly important. Every task you have in your club has a purpose, and that purpose is to take care of members. And if the purpose is not to take care of members, then perhaps you shouldn't be doing it. Am I suggesting that goals don't matter? No, goals matter. I'm suggesting that the only way you will achieve your goals this coming year is to focus on people first. Because if I hadn't done that in Scottsdale, Arizona, I never would have had that human action. So what is my challenge for you today? Where do we go from here? My challenge to you is become the leader your members deserve. To use your influence in the pursuit of the club mission or the pursuit of whatever other organization's mission that you are working for or your personal mission. Use your influence in a positive and supportive way to change the thoughts and actions of other people and become the leader your members deserve. District 10, thank you so much. I believe we're going to be moving into question and answer right now.
Yes, that's correct. Matt, thank you so much for that very inspiring and timely Keynote. And I'd like to ask everyone to unmute themselves so we can applaud. That was amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
At this time, we will mute ourselves again, and I will turn over to Travanti, our district director, who will lead the question and answer.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you. Thank you for that most inspiring, most reflective, and true to life presentation. There are so many aspects of it that I know each of us could connect to at different times, at different levels. And your personal stories and your examples made just everything you said come alive. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the inspiration. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for just giving us hope in these times. I do have a couple of questions that are coming in. And ladies and gentlemen, please post either directly to me or openly in the chat. I'll make sure I address all of your questions. I do have a couple here. Matt, our first question is, as a leader, how do you make members excited about taking up leadership roles?
This is a question as I've been talking to district leaders this year, it's a question I'm hearing a lot. We're having challenges getting people to step into leadership roles. And I think one of the things that happens, and I don't know all of you, I don't know the conversations you've had, obviously, but a trend I've seen is we ask for volunteers instead of ask for learners. We are not a service organization. People join Rotary to serve. So when you ask someone in Rotary to go and serve, and we may have some Rotarians here, well, that's what they joined for. They joined to give service to the community. People join Toastmasters to learn. And so if they're learning, then that's what they're there for. So focus on the learning opportunity. Find out your goals. So I'm going to ask Travanti. Let's do a little role play here real quick. So I don't know if you have all of your area directors, but you've identified me as a potential area director for next year, and you're calling me to talk to me about that. So how would you approach that?
So Matt, I've seen you in action, and I've wondered many times when you spoke that you speak with authenticity. I see something in you. I really do. I really do. And I can share a few experiences where I have felt either doubtful about myself, or I have felt that I have to aspire to someone who is larger than life to be a leader. But I say, if I can do it, you can do it. I'm looking for leaders. I'm looking for someone who has the real desire to work with members. And I've seen that in you. And I know that District 10 has a lot to offer. Would you be willing to listen to my story? And would you be willing to come aboard my team?
So here's some suggestions I would have for you. Do you even know what my goals are? You focused on your needs first. You didn't ask what I was wanting to get out of Toastmasters. So the first thing I would do is say, I loved your opening. You've seen me, you've been impressed by me. There's a reason you're calling me. And I probably in the back of my mind know she wants me to do something. But you started focusing on what you needed, not what I needed. So focus on what I would have said, so Travanti, what are your goals now that you're finishing this current role? And so I'm going to ask you as an immediate, about to be immediate past district director, what are your goals? And now once I understand that, now I can say, oh, well, here are some opportunities that might help you reach those goals, because here are the lessons you're going to learn. And so now I know what is in it for me. Okay. And we all wish everyone was altruistic.
Absolutely.
Okay. But the research says altruism doesn't exist. The research says everybody has a motivated self-interest when they agree to do anything, even if it is something that is altruistic. And that's fundamentally okay.
Sure.
The person who's starving doesn't really care why he's getting food. He doesn't care what the intrinsic benefit that the person giving them the food is getting. What they care about is that they got fed. So from that perspective, I would just focus on their desires, their goals and needs first. And then once you understand them, and sometimes say, well, I don't know, I haven't thought about it. Well, now you say, well, here's some things you might want to think about. Here's something that a lot of leaders in the past have found out about. Now, the other thing I would encourage is whenever possible, have somebody initiate that first conversation who knows the individual.
Absolutely.
That conversation is much better received from the current area director than the
Mhm.
incoming district director, unless they know that person. And they say, and so then that conversation is not to sell them on the job. The conversation is to get them on the phone with Alicia.
Absolutely.
Would you be willing to have a conversation with Alicia to further explore this? And then let Alicia sell the job. Okay, so that's what I would do. And same thing in your club. Let someone who knows them make that first approach. I want you to have a conversation with their incoming president. I think you'd be great for this role,
Mhm.
or incoming DPE because you'd be great support for them. Would you be willing to have that conversation
Absolutely.
and explore and talk about exploration as opposed to volunteering?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. And we do have a number of questions coming in. This is wonderful. And our next question is, change is hard but essential to drive forward on positive growth. How would you as a leader to influence others to change and to adapt, especially in this challenging time?
Well, again, it comes down to reassurance. The resistance to change quite often, not always, but quite often is based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We've heard that term, FUD. It's an ugly sounding word, but it's reality. The fear of the unknown is built into us in our DNA. That is why tribes exist. If you've ever read Seth Godin's book on tribes, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. And it explains why people band together and define themselves as us versus them. And the same thing goes on in our mind with change, where this is me, this is not me. So how do I bridge that gap from something that's me and now make this new behavior, this new action, this new process part of me? And the biggest thing is reassurance. Everyone's struggling with this. Everyone's going through that. Do not be dismissive of their concerns, because they are legitimate, heartfelt concerns. My wife is not a change-oriented individual. You have to prove to her that what you're going to do is better than what you're doing now. That doesn't mean she won't accept change, but her natural inclination is to say no to change. And that actually, I think, is most people's natural inclination. But what we've got now is working just fine. Why do we need to change it? So you've got to reassure them. And it is an emotional conversation. It is not a factual, logical-based conversation for most people. Even those who will tell you that it's logical, it's not. I don't know how many salespeople we have in the room. Okay, but I do sales for my company. Cervanti does sales. And they will tell you, oh, we're going through this grid process. We're evaluating all these products. And guess what it comes down to? No, I really like Cervanti. I really like her company, and I feel comfortable with her, so I'm going to work with her.
So true. Yep. Thank you. And I heard reassurance. So reassure and don't let the FUD get you, right?
Yeah, and don't dismiss.
Don't dismiss. Perfect. Perfect. Wow. I love the questions, everyone. This is wonderful. So at what point, Matt, in your Toastmasters career, did you realize that you wanted to be more than just a member? I think this one is specifically related to, when did you think you wanted to make the switch from being just a member to not just a leader for yourself, but to take on a role of leadership?
My history in organizations is I either join an organization and I leave very quickly, or I join an organization and I dive fully in. I'm 25 years a member as a Boy Scout volunteer. I've been a member of BNI and a director consultant in Business Network International for the last 11 years. So my history is, if I get in and I like the organization, I dive in. So I actually became VPE 6 months after I joined the club. And I was president the next year. I was area director, area governor at the time, the next year, and then division governor. So very quickly, I got into leadership. The moment for me, though, that made a big difference was when I was the equivalent of the club growth director. I went to mid-year training in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And there was a woman there, some of you have quite familiar with, our immediate past international president, Lark Doley. She was at that session and training. And before we went home, she said, Matt, do you have a minute? I said, okay. She goes, have you thought about what you're going to do after you finish your term as district governor? And I said, no, I haven't. And she goes, please start thinking about that. That was all she said. And I went home and I was confused. I was like, why is she saying this? And I started thinking about it. And now I'm sitting here as second vice president of Toastmasters International, partially because of that one comment. And it wasn't I think you should do this. It wasn't an arm twist. It was an invitation to explore. And so if you have people, you see that potential in, I see something in you, as Shravanti said a couple of minutes ago, think about the opportunity to explore that. One of the things I talked with the area directors, and if we got any incoming area directors on the room, please listen to this. The one phrase that club leaders hate to hear more than anything else is you saying, well, in my club, because they really don't care. They want to know what works. So watch the language you use, because when you make those things, you create barriers. When you tell someone, well, you should have done this, you created a barrier. I asked the question, what could I have done? And if I had done that, what difference would it have made? Because it's a language of exploration rather than language of judgment. And so that's what I would really encourage you to do, to encourage anyone, and we talked about this a little bit more about inspiring people to get into leadership. Use the language of exploration. And so that was the moment when I saw that I was going to be more than a district leader. That's where it started. The moment it became real for me was when I lost the election in Malaysia to become an international director. Because that's what caused me to do the self-reflection to say, why am I not connecting with people? Because what I was hearing from everybody is, Matt, we can tell you're a really smart guy, but who are you? And some of them not quite that nicely. And I realized I had created this barrier between me and other people. And it resulted from something that happened to me in high school. And it was a barrier to keep people out, so to protect myself emotionally. And what I was doing was keeping myself from creating genuine connections. And I talked to one of my best friends and I said, you know, when you met me, I said, did you see that? And she goes, yeah, absolutely. I saw it. I didn't care. I was coming through it. Well, most people won't do that. Most people, when they hit that barrier, they're going to bounce off. And so that lesson was really important to me. And sometimes those moments where the world would classify it as a failure that springboards you into future success.
So appropriate. And from what you've shared in your personal stories to what you just shared about the election, there was so much self-reflection in your presentation. I think that's who you have become. And we could see that journey and through your personal stories. So thank you for that. There's another question about this is about conflicts. What's the threshold for a conflict, whether to try hard and find a resolution within a club versus elevate it to higher leadership? Do we let our higher ups know to keep them in the loop, or do we inform only when absolutely necessary?
Okay. So there's a different answer for the district and the club. So we'll focus on the club right now. The district has no authority over your club. The district cannot help you with disciplinary issues. They can provide you guidance on the process. They can talk to you about their personal experience, but they have no role in intervening in the club. It really depends on the situation. And it's the question of, can you deal with it? And I think the question is, if you can deal with it internally, do your best to deal with it internally. But that doesn't mean you can't call world headquarters, then call the club services team and say, we need some guidance on the process to follow. We need some advice. Talk to your area director and say, we're having a conflict. How would you suggest we address it? Not what should we do, but what's the framework that we're going to use? And then there's tons of resources out there. I mean, you can go out on YouTube and search for conflict resolution techniques and find hundreds of thousands of videos that have great skills to develop and great techniques. If you have something that's a legal matter, you need to let world headquarters know. If you have something where somebody has been assaulted or harassed, you need to contact local authorities and let world headquarters know. Okay, you have to follow the law and you have to protect your members first. So if somebody is how do I put this? If somebody's well-being, either psychological or physical, is in harm, don't try to deal with that without guidance. Okay, just don't do that. You have a duty to protect your members. So I don't think I can be any firmer on that. You know, there's no bright line. It's based on your experience. I might be able to handle something in my club without guidance because of my experiences that you would struggle with, because you don't have the same experiences. We have a district director in my district. He's a police officer. He's a great guy. He's got great conflict resolution skills because he deals with conflict every single day on his job. Okay, where he's not great is with sales because he's never done sales. So he's not the guy you want going in talking to the leader of a corporation about bringing in Toastmasters. He just doesn't have those skills. So we have to rely on other people to bring those skills. So it's all about your skills and experience, practical experience, not book knowledge, but practical experience. And you've got great resources in your district there who can help you out. I know many of your past district leaders, and if you call them, I know they will be there to help and provide guidance and get you pointed to the right resources.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And I have a couple of questions here that are about commitment and time management. I have a lot on my plate. How do I commit to more? And what is it that I might be willing to find in my guts to make me do it? So I'll read it out to you. A few years ago, our club president, it would be wonderful to accept a leadership role, but as a member of a corporate chapter, it's difficult to commit time to it when our company responsibilities vastly exceed the time available. I'm currently working 10 to 12 hours per day already, and the work is still behind. Can I possibly accept another leadership role?
I can't give you an answer on that. Everyone's circumstances are unique and different. It comes down to what your priorities are, and it also comes down to what the organization's priorities are. So we have companies that have relationships with the Toastmasters Club where they have made the Toastmasters Club a priority. So it's no longer a conflict between the work priority and the Toastmasters priority. It is now in the corporate club, it's considered a part of their work experience. And so if you've got that relationship in your corporate club, that goes away. The question really is, what are your priorities in life? Now, I get that question all the time. What are your priorities in life? And where is Toastmasters on your priority list? And I'm going to tell you, it is 5th on my priority list. Now, that might surprise you. I'm second vice president of Toastmasters International. But my faith is more important than Toastmasters. My health is more important than Toastmasters. My family is more important than Toastmasters. My career is my business is more important than Toastmasters. And I am not going to put those in jeopardy for Toastmasters. And if you're a person of faith, I would suggest that you have a list that's somewhat similar to mine. If you're not a person of faith, maybe you remove the faith. But your goals are important. And so we talk about balance all the time, and I just suggest maybe a different way to look at it. Balance is ephemeral, okay? So I think of a seesaw. And if you've ever tried to get that seesaw to get perfectly balanced and stay there on a playground, it's almost impossible. Because the wind comes and all of a sudden one side goes down. Or something happens and one side comes down. Or you think you got it and then all of a sudden you start to see it go down. So it's ephemeral. It just lasts for a few moments. So I try to live my life in harmony. And I know sometimes certain things are going to take priority over others. And as long as I can step back and say, is there a beautiful sound from my life that I'm living in harmony and not living and trying to balance? Because balance to me, for me at least, it brings guilt because I'm never in balance. But I can always be in harmony. And harmony is always also based on motion. Balance is not motion. I talked a lot about cycling. You know, a cyclist is always falling. And you're using your muscles and momentum and physics to keep from falling constantly. That's what you're doing on that bike. You're constantly trying to keep from falling. And the easiest way to do that is motion. It's far easier to keep a bike upright when you're moving than it is when you're still. And the same thing's true in leadership, and the same thing's true in life. Stay in motion and live in harmony. I don't know if you can do it. I do know that the old adage, if you want something done, find the busiest person you can find to get it done, is so true, because busy people know how to get things done. And they don't, yeah, I'll go ahead and say this. I had to think about this. Multitasking does not exist. The human brain is not capable of multitasking. It's not at a conscious level. Subconsciously, a lot of stuff happens, but at a conscious level, we can only think about one thing at a time. And neuroscientists have proven this. And so what the most effective people do is they time split, and they put intense focus on what they are doing at that moment. Okay? If I have intense focus on, all I'm thinking about right now is the answer to this question. I'm not thinking about the meetings I've got later today or next week or what happened on the phone call I just got off of right before this. I'm focused right now on what I'm talking about to you today. So that's the way you can decide whether you can do it. Can you do that? My guess is you probably can, but I don't know the details of your life. The other thing I would caution you, and this was one of the funniest moments when I was recruiting an area director. I asked a guy, great guy, very busy guy, I said, I want you to be an area director. And he said, well, no, I'm too busy. If I can't do it 100%, I'm not going to do it. And I looked at him and said, I don't need 100% from you. This job does not require 100% of your abilities. I need the job done, and here's what it requires. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, this job requires 20% of your abilities. I don't need you can't do everything 100%. That is a lie. You can only do a few things 100%, or you'll die. Your body will literally explode if you try to do everything 100%. So I need 20% of you. And he goes, I can give you 20%. And he ended up becoming my area director of the year. He started 7 clubs that year. So if you have the desire to do it, you will find the time. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Just from your answer for this particular question, I think we could all write a book. There's so much philosophy in what you said, but then philosophy that we could put in practice. It's so beautiful. I especially liked what you said about, not so much living in balance, but finding that harmony. Mm-hmm. So pithy. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And I do have a lot of questions, actually 20 here. But a few years ago, our club president was not leading. He or she took feedback and pivoted and improved. But we improved because he listened. What if we have someone who is not willing to listen? What do we do as club members or officers?
Well, I mean, the club constitution provides you options, and any member of the executive can be voted out by the members of the organization. That's a drastic measure. Okay, but it's necessary sometimes. The question I ask is, I'll share you a short story. My first district conference, we had our international director there. And I went and I watched her, and I got to be honest with you, I was not impressed. And I turned to a woman, a longtime member, and I said, Diana, man, that was painful. She's an international director and gave us that speech. That was painful. And Diana looked at me and goes, Matt, you should have seen her when she started. And so sometimes you have to be willing to forgive lesser degrees of failure, is the way I put it. Okay, they're not where you want them to be, but they're making progress. So it's tricky. We need to support people, but we also need to get the mission done. And so what I would say is, if the members' lack of listening and lack of willingness to improve is jeopardizing the accomplishment of the club mission, then they need to go. And we saw that in a club down at one of our universities. This club, every single semester, would get up to 40 students, and then they would drop back down to 12. And they get up to 40 students and drop back down to 12. And what we kept hearing was, well, that's just a semester system. They come in for 6 months and they leave. And we had an area director who went in there and goes, Matt, that's not the problem. I said, well, what's the problem? He goes, the president's the problem. Because every time they get more than 15 people, she feels like she loses control. So she drives people away so she can keep control of the club. And I said, what do you want to do? And he goes, I want to drive her out of Toastmasters. And I gave him permission to do so because she was damaging the ability of the organization to complete the mission. And he just kept asking her questions. He was never rude with her. He was never disrespectful, but he called her on every single thing she was doing. And she finally got frustrated and said, I'm quitting Toastmasters. I'm leaving my office. That club has not been below 35 members until COVID-19 since. Sometimes it has to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to combine a couple of questions because we have a lot coming in. I'm going to combine 2 or 3 here and ask you about what's your best advice for a new leader coming in? How do you help them find their why, and how do you help them stay organized and feel like they're empowered to lead?
My best advice for a new leader is to give them progressive levels of responsibility and give them a small task, let them accomplish that, build their confidence, then give them a slightly larger task, give them their confidence, give them a slightly larger task, now they fail, come back, give them a smaller task, let them rebuild their confidence. It's an iterative process and it's not a straight line because they're gonna learn lessons. So I would not bring a new leader in who never run an event and ask them to run the district conference. Okay, I'd ask them to run an area speech contest. I'd ask them to run a PR campaign for the club. I'd ask them to run the club speech contest. Build their confidence on a series of tasks that are related, and then you expand the responsibility. For the leader, the thing I would say is be willing to ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness as a leader. It is a sign of great strength and great emotional maturity. And that's what we need in our leaders today more than anything else, is emotional maturity. We need to say, you know what, I'm a little out of my depth here, I need some help. And you pick up the phone, or you go over and have lunch with somebody, or you write an email and say, help. And when you ask for help, I guarantee you there's gonna be someone there who can pick up that ball and help you with it. It may not be the first person you reach, but they're gonna help you get connected to somebody who can. So that's the biggest advice from the leader specifically, is be willing to ask for help. Because if you ask, you're going to get the help. It's still your decision. It's still your issue to solve. It's not getting someone else to do, it's not dumping the problem on somebody else. It's saying, help me solve this problem.
And a lot of us have to overcome that, because when we ask for help, we think we are going to be perceived as someone who is helpless, someone who can't figure it out, right? That's really that first step to cross that threshold of reflection and saying, I'm aware, I need help, I'm going to go ask. Perfect.
And now, if you're asking for help on the same issue over and over again, that's a different issue.
Sure.
That's a different problem.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to now move on to some of the PR portion of it. How do you especially, whether it's corporate or community, but I have a couple of questions here that are specifically geared towards our corporate audience, right? Mm-hmm. How do you help corporate audiences find their why? How do you market a Toastmasters benefit in corporations and attract new members?
So one thing is, do not take the manuals in. I don't even talk about pathways. You can talk about the learning objectives from pathways, but don't talk about pathways, because the VP of education, the CEO, the executive VP of HR, they don't care about the manuals. They care about what they're going to get out of the manuals. And when I go and do corporate presentations to thank organizations for supporting Toastmasters, what I hear consistently from every single one I've ever gone to is what they're really purchasing is self-confidence. The communication skills are great. The leadership skills are great, and they appreciate those. But they understand what they're really getting is somebody who's going to be more genuinely self-confident and is willing to take a risk and learn from their missteps. Because there are so many people in corporate America today who will not speak up when an organization is going down the wrong way, who will not offer an idea to improve a product, improve a service, improve the bottom line. They won't, because they don't have that confidence. I was sitting, when I was working at Office Depot, we got hit with a really nasty computer virus. And I was actually in Toastmasters at the time. I'd been in Toastmasters probably 6 or 8 months. And we got called into a meeting, and I was the senior developer on the desktop support team. So I was responsible for desktop support for everyone on the corporate campus, 2,500 people. And we had this virus on almost every computer. And I'm in the meeting with our chief information officer, with our VP of technology services, with my director, and then I report directly to the director, and other people from other departments in the IT business. And while we were talking, I said, I looked at the CIO, said, can I draw something on the whiteboard? And so I go up, I start drawing on the whiteboard. I'm not paying attention. I'm just drawing out this plan to fix the problem. And all of a sudden I turn around, because I finished what I've drawn. I look around and I realize that no one is talking. And the CIO looks and goes, any questions for Matt? Okay, go do it. Now I actually apologized to my director. I said, I wasn't trying to take over the meeting. And he looked at me and goes, no, Matt, that's exactly what we needed, because we were going nowhere until somebody put an action plan together, and you did it, and it made sense. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll fix it and we'll move on. But let's go. What do you need to make this happen? And it was because of genuine self-confidence that I thought I could solve the problem, and I thought I had an idea. I didn't think I had the answer. It turned out I did in that case. I got fortunate. I hit on the exact right way to solve the problem. But there was that self-confidence that did that. And then 3 months later, I got a 4-level promotion to become the equivalent of a director in the organization, because of that one moment where I stepped up and said, here's how we solve this problem. And that's what companies are looking for. So if you tell those types of stories of what have happened in clubs with their members, stories sell. Don't tell facts, don't tell figures, sell with stories. Here's what's happened in other organizations. Here's what they've experienced, because that's what Toastmasters want to buy. We've got a real value problem with corporate clubs, because they come in and they think it can't possibly be worth anything because it's too cheap. We're not spending enough money. They won't blink an eye at sending somebody to Dale Carnegie for $3,000 for a week. But putting 20 people in a Toastmasters club for $1,800, they balk at, because they're not getting the value. And that's where you got to sell the story.
Beautiful. Thank you, Matt. And here is a personal question. I know you've come this far not without practicing some strategies, some techniques to keep yourself focused. So here is a question for you that we could all use help with. We've trained our minds and our bodies to distract naturally from phones, from social media, from thinking about the next set of tasks, etc., etc. But what tools do you use to stay focused on the job that work best for you? Whether it's a tool out of a toolkit that someone's selling, or a personal tool, or a mantra.
I do use checklists. They work for me. I know they don't work for everybody, but they work for me, having that checklist. And one thing I don't do, which is contrary to what some people suggest. Some people suggest you go each night and you prioritize your checklist for the next day. I don't do that. I reprioritize my checklist after every item I do on it. And I always ask myself, what is the most important thing I can be doing next? So that keeps me focused. Now, cutting out the distractions, it's just practice. That's the only way you could do it. And I've tried all sorts of things. I tried rubber bands. I had a rubber band around my wrist. When I found myself distracted, I'd smack that rubber band on my wrist and leave a little red welt, and that didn't work. I tried other things, the distraction, those didn't work. So it just is, you've just got to work within yourself to find. So I can't give you a magic pill to keep focused. It's a practice, just like playing a piano, just like learning to ride a bike. It's practice, 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 and eventually you get better at it. And then when it becomes habit is when it comes to the point where it's easy to do and you forget how you learned it. And that's where I'm at kind of right now. I can't really tell you how I learned it because it's been part of me for so long, but I'm still getting better at it. And it's just reminding yourself. And what I do now is, like, if I find myself distracted, I'll last it. And you can't stop your brain from going down a sidetrack, but you can keep it from derailing you. And so you can go down a sidetrack and you catch yourself and say, oh, get back. What am I supposed to be focused on? And that's where the checklist comes in, because I'll look at the checklist, go, oh, no, I'm supposed to be working on this. Okay. Oh, yeah, I was going to do 5 minutes on the TV at noon to see what's going on. And all of a sudden it's a half hour later because I got into it. Does that happen to me? Absolutely. I'd be lying to you to say it doesn't. I am by no means perfect at this. I've gotten better at it, and I continue to try to get better at it.
Wonderful. I think we have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to.
So what we'll do is I'm going to work on really short answers, and we'll get through as many of these as we can, okay?
Perfect, perfect. I've tried to combine a few. And here, you've been tremendously successful in the work front and in Toastmasters. And we see you as a leader, not just in Toastmasters, but as yourself too. Please let us know the top 3 Toastmasters benefit that have helped you excel overall, like all together. You say, because I was a Toastmaster for 25 years, this is what I've gotten to it. And today, Matt Kinsey is because.
Yeah. Number 1 is the ability to give feedback better. That's why I actually joined. Number 2 is the ability to receive feedback more effectively. You better be willing to listen to feedback if you're going to be in Toastmasters. And number 3 is relationships. The relationships I've built have dwarfed anything else. And I've got friends all over the world. You look at my Facebook map, it's a global Facebook map. And that brings me great value. So I would say those 3 things are probably the biggest things.
And how do you balance out, this is a personal question to me too, how do you balance out between just networking and relationship building? And there is a distinct difference.
There is a perception that there is a distinction between relationships and network building, and there's not, because network building is based on relationships. There's a relationship with a purpose. So the purpose of the relationship may be different. You know, when I was in college and asking women out, that was a specific purpose in that relationship, to create a romantic relationship. Networking, I'm not trying to create a romantic relationship. I'm trying to create a business relationship. So the fundamentals of building a relationship are the same. It's the purpose that's different.
And there's another question, there's not a question, but a comment that came through. There are a lot of things that I would like to do, or we would like to do, that right now it's just not possible. So is it a timing thing? Do we just wait? It's not for lack of desire. So how do you tell yourself that I want to do this, but what if when I'm ready, the opportunity may not exist? How do you deal with those kinds of situations?
That risk is always there, okay? All we can do in this complex world is to do the best we can today and not hold ourselves guilty. So what I say is explore it, ask advice from those you trust, ask advice and ask genuine advice, not just getting someone to agree with you, but really hearing what other people think, who know you well and have your best interests at heart, and then make the best decision you can today. And if you make the best decision you can today, there is no reason for you to regret that decision later.
So we have officers and members today that have attended. We have people from outside of District 10 as well.
Hey.
And what's your one thing that you want to leave us with today, outside of your presentation as Matt Kinsey? What do you have to tell us today?
I am so grateful for you choosing to continue to spend time with Toastmasters. In this world today, with COVID-19, with challenges with race relations, with political issues, with economic issues, the fact that you're here today as a leader, as a member of another district, wherever you're from, that carries great weight for me. And that gives me a great responsibility as a leader in this organization, because you have a choice of where you spend your time. You chose to spend your time here today. You're choosing to spend your time with the members of your club to work on your skills, to help other people work on their skills. And you have my gratitude. You have my heart. My heart goes out to you, because you could be anywhere you wanted today. You could be doing anything else today. You chose to be here. You chose to remain a part of Toastmasters. And thank you so much for that and for making a difference in your own life and making a difference in the lives of our fellow members.
Thank you, Matt. If our Zoom host could unmute all of us, just one big round of grateful gratitude to you for being
Wonderful.
Good job, Matt.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And we're so grateful for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.